Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mumbles. It's absolutely lovely. I thought I'd come out and have a bit of a chat about UK illustration and where is it. So it's not going to be a long one, but it is something that I think needs to be addressed. So I studied illustration and graduated back sort of like in the before times. But before COVID, before the pandemic, and there were already a few warning signs then. I, don't want to throw shade, but it was very sort of like, I wasn't getting the kind of sort of direction that I was hoping for. I wasn't kind of sort of like, it was all a bit sort of like, I just wasn't getting the sort of like guidance and I was hoping for a little bit of a sort of, my skills were already there. This is something that I took the decision to study it because, it's something that I've found over years. It's always been an interest and a passion for me. I kind of sort of, decided to take university to kind of sort of like learn about the ins and outs of the industry, what it was about, how to make inroads, how to make those connections, how to how to approach the industry, because it's a huge, scary, nebulous thing when you're kind of sort of like you're kind of outside talent. And there were already kind of a few warning signs then where sort of like I just kind of we weren't kind of getting that direction. I left without a working portfolio. It's not that I didn't do my research. It's just that sort of like, it just kind of, I wasn't getting that direction really. And I kind of left just as baffled as when I started really. So, I've kind of sort of like been getting back on the horse after a few years. Kind of away with sort of like everything that's happened, all of the disruption in everybody's lives, and it's disrupted a lot of industries, particularly the creative industries. There's been all of this, so auto-generated content. It has hit things like stock art quite badly. But I mean, I think it's more of an overblown kind of, a big sort of spoopy whoopy woo than sort of like it needs to be really. And the reason I say that is that sort of like, so, right, the problem is kind of twofold. So as sort of like, at least in the UK, I don't know, please do tell me if it's similar where where you're from, when you're outside of the UK. But here in the UK, the problem is kind of twofold, where it's kind of impenetrable and sort of like kind of very, very guarded. You talk to people, and it's more of a problem in like general with business. I mean, I've been trying to go to sort of like little meet and greets. I went to this really odd kind of sort of local business event where it was sort of like I turned up and it was like just this really meta experience where it's sort of like it was a platforming event, and 90% of the stores there were like platforming entities, and it's just like, okay, what do you platform? And like I've been having this odd kind of sort of like, in general, I've been having this odd kind of sort of, it's kind of like talking to a glass wall, and I don't know if anybody else is kind of getting this same kind of experience when they're just trying to earnestly kind of sort of like, okay, here I am, here's what I do. I managed to give out some like business cards like through gritted teeth. So I personally specialise, my interest is in natural history and a bit of fantasy, but I'm kind of one of those broad kind of sort of like visual communicators where I can do you pineapple, I can do you a button or a logo for your website. I kind of work a lot with sort of vector graphics and stuff, so I'm quite broadly flexible. And it was so difficult at this little business event just to kind of, I didn't even walk away with, any kind of like stress balls or like, kind of sort of like silly wiggly pens. It was a really, really strange thing where I was trying to make these kind of sort of like conversations. And like, part of the reason I do go off on tangents, I'm terrible for it. part of the reason I went into illustration is because, you know, I kind of wanted an excuse to use what I do to have interesting conversations with interesting people about what they do, and kind of sort of like, you know, get involved in some like fun, collaborative, you know, projects with people. I find a lot of joy and fun in working with people and helping conceptualize what they do and you know, bring something out of that for them. That's what illustration is. And like, yeah, it's just this weird situation where sort of like there are so many different, you know, ways to visually engage with people, and just illustration is just not in the room. It's you know, you talk to people about sort of like, oh, I do illustration, and you kind of get this like kind of curious kind of sort of like, oh, okay, that's interesting, but it's just sort of like it's in this weird kind of obscure space at the moment where people don't really know what it is. And the problem is twofold. So it's a natural thing, and it's hit a lot of industries because we've had a lot of disruption, particularly creative industries. And it's just a weird thing, you know, it's quite understandable, because we've had this kind of sort of, you know, turbulent period, that we do kind of naturally kind of turtle in a bit, we kind of sort of like, you know, constrict in a bit. So it's been really difficult to, you know, when I do meet kind of people who are active in the industry at the moment, it's kind of, you know, they're not being kind of, there's just kind of a guardedness and an aloofness, which is understandable. But, you know, where this is damaging is, so it's a bit of a twofold problem where, you know, people who are actively, you know, in the industry, actively freelancing at the moment, are kind of naturally and quite understandably quite guarded, and you know what I'll often get is sort of like I'll often get sort of like, you know, kind of, oh, I'm flattered that you're interested in what I do, and then when I kind of sort of like, you know, it's so difficult not to come across sort of, particularly after the times, there's a greater blackback gull over there, he's gorgeous, or she, I don't know, oh, what a beautiful creature. Anyway, so yeah, it's kind of sort of like natural that, you know, that we've become a little bit kind of guarded, particularly with sort of everything. But the problem is, and the warning signs were sort of like, you know, they're pre-pandemic, and I think it's this kind of sort of, there's been a bit of a rocky transition between kind of sort of like traditional media and kind of sort of like digital platforms. And what I'm getting from, you know, when I am meeting professionals, they're always really, really lovely, and they're always really engaging. But, you know, it's difficult, you know, especially after the times we've had, to not come across as sort of like probing. And I'm not trying to, and it's gotten to the point where I'll start conversations with, you know, I don't want your address book. Your clients are your clients. You know, what you do is what you do, what I do is what I do. You know, we're going to be doing different things. But what I'm interested in is kind of learning about how you got the ball rolling there. How did you do that? And what I'm getting is this kind of sort of reflexive, kind of sort of like guarded. And it's not, you know, it's not nasty. It's just kind of sort of understandably guarded. So I'm getting this kind of, you know, reflexive kind of sort of like, you know, kind of guarded reaction. Well, they'll kind of sort of like point me towards like a seminar, or they'll point me towards like the Illustrators Association. I've heard is quite good. But, you know, what I'm looking for is that kind of sort of like, you know, I'm looking to like, particularly as someone who's getting back on the horse. I've had, you know, all sorts of bonkers jobs, you know, and I'm, you know, at that point where I'm like, okay, I want to make good on this passion, on my qualifications, on my skills. And what I'm finding is this twofold problem. So the first problem is it's difficult to, you know, start these kind of sort of discussions, and in a collaborative field, that's really scary. I'm really concerned that I'm getting these, and like, I don't want to like, you know, ooh, I'm concerned. No, it's a concerning place for what is fundamentally a communicative, collaborative industry to kind of be in. It's kind of sort of like a little bit, sorry, it's freezing. I came out here in the jumper like a mad one. Yes, so yeah, we've got that problem where it's difficult. The effect is that, you know, incoming talent is finding it very difficult to get that ball rolling for themselves. And what is happening, and what I don't think that the kind of sort of like, established industry doesn't understand, is that what's happening is that upcoming talent is, coming in, getting lost, getting confused, and what they're doing is they're ending up kind of, being diverted onto really dodgy websites like them, like Freelancer, like Fiverr, like Upwork, where upcoming talent is getting absolutely just, it's an absolute feast of, the score. You go on Upwork, you pay for points to, bid for, client commissions, and, there's like absolutely just ludicrous stuff going on, like, a Fiverr for like a week's worth and like, free revisions, and it's like, and I don't want to blame the clients, because like it's a scenario where it's like, well, if you're a car dealership and you're offering a free Ferrari, you're going to take that free Ferrari, you're going to be like, yeah, give me those keys, and then you're going to go home and your mates are going to go, is that a Ferrari? Where did you get that from? And you're going to go, oh, that's mental, this car dealership is giving away free Ferraris. So, you're going to like end up with this situation where you're going to get a bunch of people expecting a free Ferrari, and you can't blame them for that, because you would. You'd be like, yeah, I'll have a free Ferrari. Yeah. But, so I'm talking to people who are sort of like, already well established in the industry, and like, they're established working illustrators. And they're kind of sort of saying to me, times are tough and it is difficult. And what I'm seeing is, it's not that there isn't work, there's a lot of work. And funnily enough, a lot of it is fixing the mistakes that, I don't like to use the term AI, it's not artificially intelligent, it's auto-generative. A lot of it, funnily enough, is fixing the mistakes of auto-generative content. So I think there was a kestrel. There's a lovely little kestrel. He's hunting around for mice and voles at the moment. So yeah, the work is out there, but because the industry has become so guarded, what's happened is that incoming talent has gotten diverted off into these dodgy websites, and that's where all the work is flowing. That's where all of your clients are going. If you can get a free Ferrari, then people will turn up and ask for their free Ferrari. So yeah, I mean, a lot of high quality work is being absolutely just savagely taken advantage of by these dodgy websites. And you go on Upwork, and it's not like there's book illustration, there's like loads and loads and loads of stuff. Yeah, just like, can you fix this? AI ruined it. Can you fix this? There's loads of that. That's 10 a penny. So yeah, there's tons of work. But what's happened is where the established industry has become so guarded, incoming talent has ended up, that the industry has pivoted onto these really dodgy websites. So yeah, I just wanted to discuss this because it's something that is, it's important to me and it's concerning to me on a, not a concerning, but fundamentally quite concerning. That the industry is, the work is still there. There's still a lot of demand for illustration. It's just, because of this kind of twofold problem, it's all pivoted onto these, dodgy websites, and incoming talent is getting horrendously taken advantage of, and that's taking work away from the established industry. So the work is still there. It's just that, unfortunately, there's a bit of a twofold problem, and all of this incoming talent has ended up diverted onto these dodgy websites. So, illustration should be present, and work is still there, demand is still there. There's like, and there's all of these new kinds of sort of like, digital kind of sort of formats, like, tons of work available. However, incoming talent, because they're not getting that guidance, is being horribly taken advantage of. So yeah, I just wanted to discuss that. Just a bit of a kind of sort of like, kind of get my head out of, this kind of sort of like, well, I wanted to discuss it, get it out of my head. it needs really to be talked about, because it is kind of sort of like, I don't want it to be like a hot button topic, but what I mean is that it needs to be discussed, because it's terrible to see something that I'm passionate about kind of struggling with this kind of awkward transitional period. And we've been in this space now for like, the warning signs were there when I was studying. I'm having people sort of saying that they were having similar experiences, kind of sort of like, in the sort of like early sort of 20-teens, sort of like, it's been a bit of a awkward transition for kind of like, established industries to kind of like understand and deal with, the fact that there are these kind of like new kind of sort of like digital markets. And anyway, I just wanted to explain, like, it's a bit of a twofold problem, and that's where the industry is kind of, that's where the work is flowing. Incoming talent needs a bit of guidance, because what is happening is it's getting diverted off into just, bottom of the barrel, just these dodgy little websites. All the work is there, but like I said, if you offer a free Ferrari, people will take the free Ferrari. So thank you so much. I am looking to, so I'm trying to, I've had a lot of kind of sort of like things and stuff that I've been busy with. I'm kind of trying to set this channel up as sort of like a little bit of a supplementary thing to what I do. So I'm looking to do a bit more structured content. If you're interested in, learning a bit of sort of like, foundation art and design, I'm like thinking, I'm planning to do a bit of a sort of like a mini course of it, like, anybody interested in just learning those basic foundations. It's kind of for me, because I kind of, I'm interested in going on to teach at some point. So it's a bit of kind of sort of practice work for me. So come along with me. They're not going to be like super duper polished, but it's like, come along, learn a bit of art. It's, kind of, a good place for me to kind of sort of like, I want to share it. I want to, teach people the joy of learning, kind of sort of like, visual sort of like communication. And if you're interested in that, that's kind of sort of like, a little upcoming project. Also, little bit of a self plug. If you like my little intro, I do kind of sort of like vector spot graphics. So if you're interested in commissioning me, drop me an email. I'm happy to chat rates. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye. Take care. Say hello to my horse, isn't it? It's quite beautiful. Just came out here to just kind of get these thoughts out of my head. A bit of a sort of like thought dump. Bit of a chat about sort of like where things are at the moment, and just because it is something I think that needs to be kind of discussed. So thank you so much for listening. I'll let you go. Take care. Goodbye. I will see you around.